I can't imagine how difficult fixing electricity problems are. You think those problems are big? Well, I'm afraid you ain't seen nothing yet. The fact that you're in this hall, the fact that you're joining us virtually, probably means you already know how big our economic problems are. You know the lived experience of it. You know that we have an incredibly high unemployment rate, that the older you are, the more likely you are to be in employment, and that the younger you are, the more likely you are to be unemployed, to have no job, no hope of getting a job, and possibly not much hope at all. You can argue with the Centre for Enterprise Development all you like, but I don't know if we can argue with them when they say that if we do not solve our unemployment crisis, it may not matter if we solve almost all of our other problems. That's the scale of this problem, our unemployment crisis. It's a problem that defines society. There are so many issues that come out of our incredibly high youth unemployment rate. We have the violence, the hopelessness, the contestation over resources. We have the violence of the war in Ukraine, which has an impact on what you pay for fuel and on what you pay for food. Within all of this is corruption. And that's before we even start on how impossible it is to start a new project without the construction mafia coming and trying to take a piece of it. And then there's government policy. Prem Patel may be an honorable man at the Department of Trade and Industry. There's no evidence that any of the policies that he is implementing are actually working. So then, how do we fix it? What solutions are there? It's a very tough task. Let's find out. Coming to the stage, Daily Mavericks, Ray Mahlaka and Tim Cohen. They're joined by the CEO of the Harambee Youth Employment Accelerator, Kasthuri Soni, the founder of Bank Zero, Michael Jordaan, and the former CEO of the Post Office, I think I can call him a straight talker, Mark Barnes.
Mahlaka, I'm with the Daily Maverick, and I'll be chairing this panel discussion about the economy. I think we can all agree that our fortunes and quality of life it depends on the performance of the economy, and I don't have to tell you that South Africa's economy has been broken for many years. You experience and feel it every day. Some of the dysfunctions in the economy, that is, but the country and the economy has to work for everybody, and I don't know about you, I don't have a plan B, so I am committed to South Africa and making it work in whichever way I can. I guess everyone here agrees, hey? Nobody has a plan B here, hey? Anyway, so I'll just dive into the panel and start with Mark Barnes. Mark, the problems are well defined in South Africa. We understand them, we know them, we feel them. Do you feel like we are moving fast enough to tackle these problems? Unemployment, slow economic growth, and just the dysfunction in municipalities as well. Are we moving fast enough to tackle these problems at all?
Thanks. No, I don't think we're moving at all, to be honest. We might be going backwards. I've just been driving around the country for the last few weeks, and it's remarkable how many places you come across where people actually have nothing, but they're still smiling. So the thought occurred to me that we should be devolving, not centralizing economic power, that we should be taking economics to the people, that we should stop talking about grand plans in central government or in big boardrooms, and we should look to the local natural resource, which is principally people, and get the money to where they can walk to, rather than trying to bring them into some definition of a formal economy. So there's some elements of design which work for me on that. The first one is getting the funding right. You cannot borrow money at an effective 50% interest rate and invest it in a business and hope to grow. Not possible. Okay, so the money has to be borderline for free or at least at risk. It has to be equity. The government must provide some money. Stokvels must get involved, and I'll get back to why that must be the case. There must be international grant funding and so on. We need to put equity capital in local businesses, and that has a number of specific, I've called this LEE, Local Economic Empowerment, to replace BEE, where LEE creates new value for many, whereas BEE transfers old value for few. And so I'm arguing that we need to get down and get dirty amongst the people who actually need to make the living. Now, there's some barriers that we will cross in doing this. The first one is the trust barrier. I mean, for example, if we had to have another 5% increase in social grants, that would be, whatever, 10 billion rand. Why don't we take 10 billion rand and recklessly invest it in local businesses and see what happens? Okay. Why don't we, for the first time in South Africa, give people with some bare qualifications and evidence of acumen the capital and let them go play in their world? Go into the middle of Alexander, and you will find bustling, non-tax-paying, bustling economies that are thriving if we could gather that resource. The payoff profile for government would be we would create an independent population. We don't do social development in South Africa, we do social rescue. And that's because we've created a dependent population on the stupid notion that if they depend on us, they'll vote for us. Quite the contrary must be found to be true. So if we create this economy from the bottom up, my view is that it will be bought into, that it will be understood, that it will be local. Stokvels. Why Stokvels? A phenomenal characteristic of Stokvels is they're a very credit-worthy organization. You look at Crimea Bank in India and other places. Stokvels bring with them peer review. So if we have got our Stokvel money in your local business and you pitch up on Monday with a Rolex, we kind of want to know where you got that from, right? And so if you're investing money down your street, you're going to oversee the money, you're going to see the benefits incrementally. We've got to forget about long-term promises and look for incremental, measurable outcomes today. And so I'm saying, devolve all power, including judicial power. Let decisions of municipalities and courts locally be final and binding. Let's not take our parking fines to the Constitutional Court, and let's not take our business plans to the center of government.
Okay. Mark, let me just jump in. Let's pause for a moment.
You could have used Postbank for this, by the way.
You've given us a lot to chew on, but let me bring in Kasthuri here. You deal with unemployment, and we know it's a ticking time bomb in South Africa. At Harambee, you connect young people to job opportunities. Are we moving fast enough to tackle the unemployment crisis, you think?
Thank you, Ray, and good morning, everyone. Really excited to be part of a conversation that's speaking to the solutions that can build back a better South Africa. And absolutely, to give you a perspective from a youth unemployment perspective, is Harambee for the last 11 years has actually been able to provide pathways, 900,000 pathways to young people. And essentially, our approach has been to partner with the private sector, government, and civil society to collectively build innovative, data-driven solutions to pathway young people into economic opportunities at scale. Before I give you more about our solutions, let me call out 2 points. One, the youth unemployment crisis is complex and layered. There isn't a silver bullet or a linear solution. Two, at Harambee, we always have this mantra that we must stay in love with the problem. And what that means is that we will continue to iterate our solutions as the problem evolves and based on what the problem demands of us. To give you a sense of our suite of solutions that we implement, at the core of our model is a strong focus on unlocking earning opportunities for young people across the formal and informal economy. We partner with employers to place excluded youth into existing opportunities in the economy. Our founding employers were the likes of Direct Access, Hollard, Nando's, Teleshore, Clientele. And in fact, my esteemed panelist, Mr. Jordaan, represents an organization that's been a long-standing partner of Harambee. FNB was an early adopter that actually has employed thousands of excluded youth through the Harambee model. Another area of focus for us is that we convene coalitions of business, government, and civil society to compact and mobilize around interventions that are needed to unlock jobs in priority growth sectors of the economy, For example, the digital sector or the global business services sector, also known as the business processing outsourcing sector, which in fact to date has contributed over 4 years about 65,000 new jobs. What Harambee also does is that we partner with governments to place young people into public employment programs. As an example of that, through the Presidential Youth Employment Stimulus Initiative, we worked with the Department of Basic Education to place over 500,000 young people into teacher assistant and admin assistant programs. What that public employment program does is that it enables young people to earn an income, build their employability skills, which are a signal to the formal economy, and some of them even use it to springboard into micro-enterprise or entrepreneurial opportunities. Another solution in Harambee's toolbox is that we also innovate and we pilot demand-led skilling innovations that are responsive to the market and that enable young people to transition into jobs in the economy. For example, we have set up a digital simulation academy called DigiLink in our Cape Town office, which really gives young people a 12-month integrated work experience working in a live environment on real clients, real projects. Let me bring that to life through a story of a young lady by the name of Inga. Inga is from Khayelitsha. She studied, obtained a certificate in systems development, but still could not find a job because she didn't have work experience. Inga then went on to do software programming in the Capacity Accelerator, still couldn't find a job, no work experience. She was then accepted into the DigiLink program, where she worked on BMW as a client of hers in their 12-month work integrated learning experience. And today, Inga has been employed by BMW in a software testing role where she's earning a salary that is certainly transformative for her livelihood and that of her household. And in fact, that model actually creates a demonstration effect for reshoring digital work back into South Africa. The last solution I'll talk about, Ray, is that Harambee also operates a multi-channel platform called SA Youth, which supports a network of over 3.6 million young people, giving them access to employability skills, giving them free access to opportunities that are aggregated in a single place, and really supporting them on their work-seeking journeys. Underlying all of our interventions is really based on a decade of experience, is breaking the barriers that young people face in searching for work so that we can actually make the labor market more inclusive from a financial and economic participation perspective.
I think the case study of Inga is very interesting because often young people don't have an entry point into the labor market. What's scary for me is that there are some young people who may never know what it feels like to earn an income. But perhaps, Michael, let's bring you in here. The economy is not growing enough to create jobs. What do we do in the interim to get more people in the labor market without economic growth at the moment?
So first of all, morning everyone. Great to be here. I have teenage daughters and they don't listen to me, and when they do they interrupt and disagree, so this is actually a wonderful experience to be kind of one-sided. And I was at the very first Daily Maverick gathering more than a decade ago, and it's 10 times bigger, so it's great. So the whole thing, there's a concept in economics called opportunity cost, and it's what could have been. And I think that's the frustrating thing, is we could be growing at 4 or 5% as we did in the past, and all it needs is choices. We need to make decisions. Some of them are hard, but growth is a choice. I mean, this is the most basic thing. So we could be growing much higher, and we could do so pretty quickly if we took the right type of decisions. A lot of that is what government needs to do. And unfortunately, finger pointing and criticizing and all these type of things is leading to very little results. So what I can just convey to you is the stuff I've been doing since I left the big corporate, and I hope that maybe it inspires some of you to do the same. I started investing in startups. And this wasn't a deliberate strategy, you know, the ones I chose to back, but it turned out that the ones I backed, when I looked at the portfolio, are the ones that are solving problems in society that I care about. Some are education, some are employment, I'll get to that point, some are about crime, and it is quite amazing and energizing to surround yourself with people who are making a difference. So instead of just pointing fingers, and you may point fingers, you're completely justified to say, I don't know, potholes should be fixed, or the curriculum in education is wrong, etc. Get involved in something, use some of your capital and your knowledge. I mean, what we have in this room is, you know, you are capable of changing South Africa if you get involved, and then we can solve problems. So you ask a question specifically about skills or employment. There are things, again, that government can do that the country desperately needs, like infrastructure, roads, dams, ports, that are skills intensive and or labor intensive and doesn't require such high skills. Definitely we should do that. But then the type of Arambi programs, or I can again just give you an example of one of the startups I'm involved in. It's called Codex. Codex does software development. It takes kids from townships, which are arguably disadvantaged areas, and it trains them, and within 1 year, they are capable software developers. In other words, they get white-collar jobs. They go from an unemployed situation to, you know, supporting a family of 3 or 4 or 5 and doing it. So it can be done. We're grateful to have some sponsors that are helping us do it. Next year, it'll be 150 lives that are changed through a startup that is making a difference. Now, that 150 could be times 10, it could be times 100 over time, and that's what these startups do. So I'm saying I don't think there's a magic thing that tomorrow we can solve the whole unemployment thing, but we need to take the right growth decisions to get the economy to grow. When we grew at 4 or 5%, the job market was actually quite vibrant. We mustn't forget that. It's not that we have jobless growth. You just need to get over the 3%. So I think we can solve South Africa's problems. We have wonderful people who are willing to do it. We have somebody who even would run the post office, you know, sitting right over there. And it's just announced it needs another 3.4 billion. Mark tells me it's closer to 10 billion and so on. Meritocratic appointments make the economy grow, and the job growth will happen from there onwards. But my basic message to all of you is try and get involved. It is far more energizing to get involved than to just validly criticize.
Yeah. I think we can all agree with that. And we spoke backstage about my concern about the economy growing at a 4 or 5%. And my biggest fear is that there might be people who are left behind because unemployment is so structural in South Africa. We're talking about people who don't have the right skills for a 21st century economy, people who live far from economic opportunities. So my biggest fear is that if we grow at a 4%, 5% rate, there might be some people who are left behind and won't enjoy the spoils of economic growth. But Tim, we're journalists. We are apoplectic by nature. We're very negative. We point at the problems, but don't table solutions. How do we fix all these problems? Do you have any ideas?
Well, hi everyone. Great to be here, of course. Michael says we shouldn't point fingers, you know, but I'm a journalist. This is the only thing that I'm able to do. I don't really have any other skills. I mean, I was writing the other day about SAA, and I sort of chanced on this thing about the 2 laws of holes. If you read my column on this, this will be familiar, but I always thought there was only one law of holes, and the law of holes is that when you're in a hole, you must stop digging, right? But apparently, everybody knows that, right? But apparently there's a second law of holes, which is if you stop digging, you're still in a hole. And I feel this is where we are, sort of, and it's because of our the intensity of our economic problems that we are desperate for solutions. And because we're desperate for solutions, we grasp at the wrong solutions and we stick to them even when they don't work. So, you know, I mean, my solution here, and please, this is not the Daily Maverick solution, and I'm, you know, sort of aging journalist, so please take this from whence it comes, but my solution to this is that we need a completely different approach to government and the private sector. We have government trying desperately to fix the problem, completely understandably. I can totally sympathize with their motivation, but they're doing the wrong thing. They have to do something else. And that something else is to stay out of the economy as much as possible and let the private sector take this over. Thank you. I mean, you know, so that's pointing fingers, but it's also not pointing fingers. I understand why they're doing it. We all understand why they're doing it. But the idea that government should be a job creator, really, it's been our curse, and it is the single biggest reason why we have the growth rate which is under the 4% that we need. So, you know, and all of the examples here are, you know, they're funny. I mean, they're actually funny. I mean, Mark knows more about this than I do, but I read the other day about this tender process for, you know, there was a big storm in KZN, part of the N2, very important roadway was washed away, and then there was a sort of tender process in order to try and fix the road, right? This is not, you know, a huge. This is not brain science, right? Astrophysics. It's just building the damn road. So they put out 34 tenders to fix the roads. Not a single one of them was consummated, because the stipulations that they put into the contract, they wanted only people from KZN to work on the roads. They wanted this, they wanted that, they had to have that. You had to have certain amounts of local construction. You had to have materials that only came from KZN. You know, it was just impossible. If they had just said to WHBO, just build the damn road, and then, you know, hundreds of thousands of people would have been able to commute easier than they have. Sorry, I'm going on. All of us, we overtalk. So just tell us to shut up. You know, your point is made. Shut up. Move on to the next one.
But Tim, my boss, I want to build on your point.
You see, I think the problem was they said build the damn road, and they didn't know which one you meant.
You know, Tim is my boss here, so if apologies, if I screw up, I'm going to be in big trouble here. But Mark, let's bring it in here. The P word, privatization. It seems like it's a swear word in government, or the government bringing on the private sector to fix some of these problems. Is that the way to go, to pare down the degree of the government's control of the economy and bringing in the private sector? Is that the way to go to fix some of these problems?
The answer is no, actually.
Okay.
The private sector will solve every aspect of the economy for about 5% of the population, because that's the price point. So PostNet works, but only for a few people. Okay, no one else can afford the courier prices. So what we need is a partnership. Okay, we don't need a binary solution which is either public or private. We need to redefine the roles that will be part of the cake that we need to mix. So government has a huge role to play, enabling, not dictating. You know, so government must create tax incentives or regulations which invite commerce not only locally but internationally. So I don't think we hand it over to the private sector. I mean, take social grants, for example. We took that back from the private sector because I regarded it as a service, not a business. Okay, we saved the government 1.2 billion per annum, and we saved the grannies about 1.4 billion per annum, and that went back into the fiscus. Now, what the fiscus did with it, we could have a long debate about. So it's not that government shouldn't be a player. Government should be a massive player, but they should subscribe to, you know, proper principles of business when it comes to business. We are not in the same room. We're not welcome in that room. There's an inferiority complex in business inside government, and outside government there's a superiority complex amongst us, the business people. Never the twain shall meet. Okay, so we need to throw the rules away about what we define. Even the words that we use need to change, and we need to redefine an economic model which is bespoke for the circumstances that we're in now, not the ones we were in or the ones that we aspire to be in, but the place that we are now. Okay. And so that also means we've got to sort of follow the Chinese problem where you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, you know, and I'm not very good at that. But, and so we need to co-design things. We need to go like, what is your understanding of this? I mean, let's just take I'll talk 2 minutes about the post office. It's not polite to speak ill of the dead. So what is the post office? You know, the post office is a commercially irreplaceable footprint. You could never rebuild it, okay? It's potentially a channel, every count is a channel between government, the state and the people. We should be going there to get our COVID vaccines. We should be going there to download education, download healthcare, download all of these things. You know, and for that it had to be an integrated financial services, blah, blah, fish-based, okay? And so the trouble is we are stuck to old definitions. And we've got people in government and in business, if I might say so, who are too damn old, you used the word damn, so it's legal, to see a long enough track to make deep investments in a co-designed future. And so we have short-termism and you know, people eating what we haven't yet made, and we need to redefine that. Privatization is not the panacea, and nor is something like prescribed assets totally bad. So we've got perceptions about these old words. If you told every pension fund that it should take 3% of its money and invest in projects which were approved by a council predominantly presided over by business people, why shouldn't that work? And we give them a running yield, you know? And so we have to take our baggage and leave our shit at the door, if that's, you know, and we have to come into the room with no baggage and embrace each other. We have to hug each other. That's how bad it could be. Seriously, we're over it. And I can tell you that most everyday South Africans who bump into each other are over it. We want to be friends. We want to get on. We want to build a country together. We've solved this in sport. In some sports. I mean, rugby is a classic example. We're world champions in rugby for no, you weet, it won't last forever. With Rassie tweeting instead of coaching. But we solved it, okay? You go to a rugby stadium today, it's a multicultural, multiracial, but the truth is we know the end game. The objective is simple. By the time the whistle blows, the person who's got the highest score wins, okay? So that means that the big fat guy in the prop, and they all look a bit overweight to me, the big fat guy in the prop knows you can't run, so he takes the ball and passes it to the skinny little oak who can't tackle on the wing. Because that oak can run fast and score a try. And they hug each other afterwards, man. You know, they don't even come from the same tribe or species, some of them. And so the foundations of a constitutional democracy relies, I think, to a much larger extent than we did rely on it, on a homogeneous society. We're not homogeneous. We're anything but homogeneous. And so we need to cater for those exceptions by holding hands. We're not doing that. We've created another elite that wants to preserve itself. That elite is a different racial composition than it was before, but it's still an elite. I might say represented rather well here.
Yeah, on that note, so I think let's bring in Kasthuri here. Harambee, I think you plan to support about 3 million job seekers and create 1 million job opportunities, I think, in the next 5 years. What will it take to get there, and what can everybody in the room do to help you get there, and also, you know, create jobs outside of the Harambee structures as well? What can we do going out of here, out of this platform?
Sure, thanks. I mean, through my reflections, I'll just share another data point for actually coming together is working, and that is in this youth unemployment space. I think we all agree that youth unemployment is a crisis. The scale, depth, and complexity of the problem is too significant to be solved by a single actor in the system, and therefore we have to come together in social compacts. Harambee's strategy is to address the challenge at a systemic level through multi-sector partnerships with government, business, and civil society. In fact, Harambee is an anchor partner in the Presidential Youth Employment Intervention, which is a national, comprehensive, coordinated response to the youth unemployment crisis. We are working together with a coalition of partners, including the Department of Employment and Labor, to unlock opportunities across the full economy, meaning formal sector jobs, entrepreneurial opportunities, as well as public employment programs. And what we have identified, despite the job losses, despite the low growth economy, there are sectors where there are prospects for growth, and we call those sunrise sectors. And the sectors that we have prioritized that have demand for young people are the digital sector, global business services sector, agriculture sector, early childhood development sector are areas and priority areas where we will work together, convene a coalition of these actors so that we can mobilize and compact to unlock these opportunities, whilst we continue to work with partners in the existing economy, jobs like in the financial services, banking, insurance, to unlock those jobs. And just to give you again some data points, so in the global business services sector, there's a commitment to create 350 to 500,000 net new jobs by 2030. And of significance from a youth employment perspective is that Harambee, the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, together with BPESA, which is the industry body, came together and were able to get included in the master plan for the sector a 30% inclusive hiring target, meaning that any international business processing outsourcing operator that wants to set up operations in South Africa, to qualify for the incentive of their net new jobs, at least 30% have to be young people that are typically excluded from the economy. Similarly, in the digital sector, there's been significant progress. Based on some research, we have identified over 60,000 entry-level jobs that can be unlocked. The Digital Work Accelerator is a national initiative that has been established by a collaboration, again, by business, government, and social partners to unlock those jobs, as well as to create skilling solutions that are needed to fulfill those jobs. So essentially, some of the things to add to that that business can do, absolutely convening these multi-sector collaborations to actually unlock these opportunities, as well as adopting recruitment practices that are more inclusive. So moving away from those traditional exclusionary signals of employability, looking at alternative signals, looking at models to set up operations in townships to promote a township economy, looking at inclusive procurement. And government itself, as has been mentioned, there's lots of money in the system, but it's really trying to redirect some of that skilling money away from input-based training to more outcomes-based results like jobs and demand-led training that's going to fulfill needs of industry. Government can also, of course, recalibrate employment incentives that are going to maximize youth labor absorption. Government also needs to look at red tape and bureaucracy that stifles entrepreneurship. And just to say that many of these initiatives are already being undertaken and progress is being made under the banner of this Presidential Youth Employment Intervention, not forgetting that the barriers that young people face daily in their work seeking are high, and so we consistently have to also review how do you shift those barriers, how do you break down those barriers. As an example, the transport barrier, the high data cost barrier. So the SA Youth Platform matches young people based on geography to opportunities, thereby addressing the transport barrier.
So we have about 15 minutes left during this discussion, and I want to move on to questions that we're receiving. And for the panel, the whole panel, Michael, I think you can tackle this one. Government and self-serving public sectors or servants are deeply distrustful of the private sector and their intentions. Good ideas are often shut down. How do we get them on board? I don't think we can exactly move forward. At present, I feel like we're going around in circles. So creating that trust within government circles of the private sector, how do we get there, you think?
There was mention of a Chinese proverb earlier. The one I prefer is the one that actually ushered in a market revolution in China, and that was that it doesn't matter what color the cat is, as long as it catches mice. And what that does, it liberates you from having an ideological perspective, nationalization or privatization. And it just says, what is going to get the job best done? So, for example, I'd like our ports to work. Now, whether it's government that makes them work or private sector, doesn't really matter. We just need them to work, right? So first of all, I would say, let's just park ideology and have a kind of factual approach to what works. And the second one is, I would say, let's just have an open mind to experiment and to do things even on a small scale. Just using ports again, we don't have to nationalize or privatize all of them. Why don't we give one port or two of them to the private sector and other to the government, and we kind of see what works best, and then over time, that's what we start doing. So this, incidentally, is one of the lessons out of startups. You focus intensely, you solve one problem, you prove that you can solve it, and only then do you scale it. So I sometimes think, the question, obviously in the way it's posed, is like this big macro question. We can solve things locally, we can solve things small, you can focus it, but let's do away with ideology, let the cat just catch the mouse.
Yeah. And Tim, I mean, we used to write a lot about the trust deficit between the private sector and private sector. We saw this a lot during the Jacob Zuma presidency, that the private sector was often distrustful. The private sector was often distrustful of the public sector. So how do we improve that trust, between the private and public sector and narrow whatever deficit that's there?
No, and I think the interesting thing about this trust difference is that it's got worse, and it's got worse even though we have the most business au fait president of the democratic era, and to me this is extremely curious, and I think the core to it is that we have to recognize that we have this extraordinary political problem, and that is, more than many other countries, we have a missing middle. We have a huge differentiation between the people who are voting for government in the expectation that they will serve them, and you have people who are critical of government who have the expectation that government is hopeless. I think this is I love Michael's idea about experimentation. This is how China changed. People think that there was all of a sudden one day they decided to go for the cat. But in fact, what happened? The history of China was really the example of Hong Kong. The experimentation with a Hong Kong-like systems in parts of China. It was and these were all test runs, and we need more of those. I think those. I also think I don't want to point fingers. No. Michael says I mustn't point fingers, but I want to point fingers. The government's got to change. They've got to change their idea about obviously the private sector has to change too. But the private sector's solution to all of these things is to do it themselves. Yesterday, we wrote about this, and I'm sure Mark was interested in this too, was how PEP is now delivering 11,000 parcels a day. The PEP-to-PEP parcel system has just taken over a huge chunk of what the post office used to do. Okay. And that's so South African. That's so South African that we should look at the problem and we find a solution. And it's fantastic, except that it weakens the post office. I suspect that's one of the reasons why the post office, other than the fact that Mark has left, is in such dwang. But the trust issue, get over it. Just move on. We are desperate. This is a time bomb. Fix it.
Ray, the thing is that failure becomes a habit. Okay. When I arrived at the post office, since you all keep bringing it up, failure was a refuge. Failure was a place where you went to be safe. Okay. It was that bad. So anyone who did their homework on time was regarded as an outcast. Or anyone who
delivered, hey?
or anyone, yeah, delivered, yeah. Or anyone who put their hand up with an idea was scorned at. Okay. And so we changed that. We sort of eliminated that ceiling, and we said you will be rewarded for having an opinion, even if it's wrong. You'll be rewarded for it. and it's okay to do your homework, and it's okay to do the right things. And so we have become a problem-describing country. We are the most eloquent problem describers because we feel safe having described the problem that's okay now. Everyone knows what's wrong. That's not okay. Okay, and so it takes risk and leadership, and we can't solve South Africa's economy in a textbook or in a short time. What we can solve, though, is the prospect of economic dignity for all. We can create an environment which invites success instead of dwelling on failure. We can encourage people to stand up and give them a bit of space to breathe. And, you know, Michael, everyone's talked about this. And we can stand back from our prescripts of what's right and what's wrong. And government has to stand back. I use this example. I was once in that famous room 159 in the Union Building, and they said, what's wrong with SOEs? And I said, it's like this. If the cardiologist is performing a heart transplant in the theater, just because you own the hospital doesn't mean you should go in and tell him what to do, okay? And I think that's, you know, that would be some of the problem, is that we need to define our roles, and we need to, I mean, I've seen the most spectacular failures at the Olympics when some guy drops the baton, okay? We don't even know where the baton is, okay, to pass to each other. We need to pass this problem around. We need to have common interest and national pride. Sport does that for us.
Kasthuri, let's bring you in here. Mark, a lot of sporting...
Except for Bafana, yeah.
A lot of sporting references here, Mark. Kasthuri, let's bring you in here. There's a question about, should small businesses also get involved in these conversations with organizations like Harambee? It always sounds like corporates dominate the scene. We leave the jobs problem to big business to fix. What about the role of small businesses?
Absolutely. As I said, the problem is too significant to be solved by a single actor in the ecosystem. We all recognize that in an ideal world, yes, the private sector will create many jobs, but we are in a crisis. It's going to take the entire ecosystem. And so, especially in a post-COVID environment, we know that there are not enough jobs. And so absolutely, Harambee has a focus on working in the space of micro-enterprises and entrepreneurial opportunities and understanding how can we get young people, firstly from standing still to earning an income and building their income resilience in that process, to then obviously understanding how do you progress to gig work, freelance work, to commission-based work, and a whole spectrum moving onto the enterprise ladder where you could potentially become an SME and yourself employ young people. Just to give you a quick story again, there's a young lady by the name of Sekametsi who's actually from Gauteng. She wanted to study to be a doctor, but she didn't get in. So what she did was she set up a business selling sanitizers with the hope that she would minimize the exchange of bacteria and, you know, support the health of communities. Sekametsi actually was accepted and won an NYDA competition, where she won money as well as mentorship. And through that process, she actually set up a business selling sanitizers that was COVID ready. And today, she innovates products. She serves as a mentor, as a public speaker that encourages other young people to set up their own businesses, and very importantly, employs young people herself. So absolutely, the informal economy, micro-enterprises, entrepreneurial opportunities are a huge part of the solve and the solution. I just want to say one thing about youth, given that we have limited time, and I feel I should end my reflections from a youth perspective. Despite everything that we've spoken about, our young people are an inspiration. They demonstrate extraordinary resilience and optimism. They are determined, they are tenacious, they have a strong desire to be productively engaged in the economy. We need to back them with intentional investment and support. And building on what Michael has said, we actually need to be part of the solution. It is in our hands to create a brighter future for our youth, keeping their voices at the center and at the heart of everything that we do. And given that this conversation was in the context of big business, I'll just make a parting shot that profit and purpose are not mutually exclusive. Doing good is good for business.
In wrapping up, we have about 3 minutes for this conversation. I just want to round up across the panel. Let's start with you, Michael. If you're Mr. Ramaphosa, if you were Mr. Ramaphosa, I mean, it's quite a politically charged year, given what's going to happen next month at an ANC level, so not much can be done. But if you're Ramaphosa, Mr. Ramaphosa that is, what are the quick fixes to move the needle and improve the quality of life of South Africans and people who live in it?
Well, look, it's easy to talk from a business perspective because we run so fundamentally differently. You know, we're not elected democratically by, you know, when I was at FNB, the 30,000 people that worked there, you know, it was a completely different thing. Therefore, you could focus completely on merit, which is super important, and you could just take the right decisions. Obviously, you needed to get the board and stakeholders along. So I have some sympathy for the fact that, you know, the first thing Mr. Ramaphosa has to do is survive the December elections so that he's in power again. But if I can, with the benefit of, you know, being a business person, say what I think is really lacking, it's not the head, it's not the plans. We're full of all these plans of what needs to be done in South Africa. You said it before, we're really bad at execution, at delivering things. And I'm nearly at the point where it doesn't have to be all the grandiose things. Let's just get momentum, let's start going. Now, the way you would do it in business is you would make everybody on your exco, they can even come up with it and say, what are your top deliverables for the next 90 days? And we can debate about whether they're the right ones. Write them down, and then we can have a conversation in 90 days whether you've achieved them. So it's this thing of, it doesn't have to be huge, big things. Let's have lots of little things, assign names to them, assign a deadline, and then actually have a meritocratic evaluation whether they will happen. So for me, that's the big thing that's missing, is execution and implementation. By the way, it's a big missing thing in business too, because we also talk big stories and so on, but it's getting things done.
Tim, quick fixes? Very fast.
I mean, there's no quick fix. The one thing I would say is that we do need to concentrate more on we need to concentrate more on how value is created and how it is sustained, and less on how it is expended. We at least need to think as a country as much on how to increase the wealth of the country as a whole, as much as we think about how we should spend that wealth. And there's a big mismatch here, and you can summarize that mismatch in 3 letters, NHI.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm speechless. Kasthuri, do you have anything else to add?
I'll be short and sharp.
Yeah.
Opportunities, opportunities, opportunities. We need to create more income-earning opportunities for young people. And my call to action would be join the coalition of change makers that are trying to get South Africa working.
Mark, you have the last word.
Stand behind the youth, not in front of them. And I'll tell a very short story. I went to a post depot at Maitland, and there was a guy that had been there for 40 years, and I walked into his office, and I said, what's the problem? He said, the trucks are too big. Now, if he'd been to Harvard, he would have said we had a, logistics optimization scheduling problem. but he got it in one, and he knew it was going. I said, why? How long have they been too big? He says, for about 3 years, which is when they had the strike in 2014. And so they hadn't downsized the organization, so they were transporting air. And I said, and what have you done about it? He said, that's transport. And so what we did is we cut down all of the silos, and we listened to the people who work there.
Time is up. I hope you're inspired. Thanks for listening.